Good morning and welcome back to our 106th Bible study. At the moment we are looking at the early monarchy, the period between the anointing of Saul and the death of Solomon, and at the moment we are drawing towards the close of that period. And here in the first book of Kings, chapter 11, verses 1 to 13, we have the alleged failings of aged King Solomon. Solomon loved many foreign women. Apart from the Egyptian king's daughter, he also married Hittite women and women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, and Sidon, even though Yahweh had commanded Israelites not to marry them, because they would cause the Israelites to serve their gods. They made him turn away from God, and by the time he was old, they had led him to do so. He was not faithful to Yahweh his God as his father had been. He worshipped the goddess Astarte of Sidon and Molech, the vile god of Ammon. He built places of worship for his foreign wives to offer incense and sacrifices to their own gods. Yahweh was angry with Solomon and said, "You have deliberately broken your agreement with me and disobeyed me. So I'm taking the kingdom from you and giving it to one of your officials. But for your father David's sake, this will take place after you have died, during your son's reign. And I won't take all of the kingdom from him, but for the sake of David and of my city Jerusalem, I will leave to him one tribe." History, to a certain extent, goes in cycles. The Puritan zealots hated it when Charles I had a Roman Catholic wife who was allowed to practice her faith. His Archbishop, Laud, was also criticised for using popish vestments and candles in worship. Maybe it was too soon after the Reformation for either of these to be acceptable. Looking back at the times described in today's reading then, Solomon's liberal attitudes to those of other faiths were not appreciated by the Deuteronomic scholars working on his story. For them it was necessary to explain why the kingdom split in 931 BC at the end of Solomon's reign. We have seen already that there had been a disputed succession and a nearly successful palace coup at the beginning of Solomon's reign. Solomon's work during his reign, centralizing both power and the worship of Yahweh down south in Jerusalem, was obviously not universally popular. The closing down of the old shrines, along with the pagan places of worship, did not go down well with the population, particularly in the more remote north, in what was to become Israel. The smaller rump state in the south around Jerusalem was to be called Judah, its inhabitants Jewish. Maybe a schism had been inevitable. Already in Solomon's old age there was weakness, and the client states of Edom and Syria had defected from Solomon's control. You can read about this in the same book, chapter 11, verses 14 to 25. The Deuteronomic scholars have given us the story of how one of Solomon's ministers, Jeroboam, was approached by a prophet, Ahijah, who persuaded him to claim the monarchy of the northern tribes. The editors of the story did not describe this as another palace coup attempt, but a split that was an inevitable consequence of God's judgment on Solomon for his disloyalty. The plot was, of course, discovered, and Jeroboam went into exile to await events. Both Israel and Judah were destined eventually to fall to the rising empires of the Middle East, Assyria and Babylon. And shortly we shall look at some of the stories that originated between the schism and the fall of Jerusalem. We shall look at these on days 108 to 166. Tomorrow it remains just to witness the end of the United Kingdom, and I shall see you tomorrow to describe that.